Evan Carroll's life was all business until fate intervened in the most unexpected way. As dusk settled over the city, Evan sat in the back of his sleek black sedan, absorbed in contracts and figures on his tablet. The sky turned deep purple and steel blue, the scent of rain heavy in the air. Evan, impeccable in his charcoal suit, preferred the certainty of numbers and deadlines to the unpredictability of people and emotions. He barely noticed the car slowing, only looking up when red and blue lights flashed ahead. His driver suggested taking the next exit. But a strange pull, a whisper in his chest, made Evan say, "No, pull over. I want to see." Surprised, the driver did as he asked. Evan stepped out into the cool evening. The sounds of sirens, urgent voices, and distant cries filled the air. An SUV lay crumpled against the guardrail, glass scattered everywhere. Firefighters worked to pry open the wreckage. A paramedic called for a stretcher. Another shook his head grimly. An EMT recognized Evan's suit and urged him to stay back. But Evan's eyes were drawn to a woman on a stretcher, unconscious, oxygen mask in place, her dark hair matted with blood. He didn't know her. Not yet. Then the paramedic's words sent a chill to him. "We've got 3 more still trapped in the back. Kids. We need backup fast, children." Evan's heart stopped. "They're still inside." The man nodded. "The front took the worst of it, but they're wedged in. The mother's critical." Without another thought, Evan stepped around the wreck. "Let me in," he said, voice steady. "I'm going in." The EMT hesitated, but something in Evan's eyes made him step aside. Evan knelt by the mangled door, ignoring the heat and sharp edges. He ducked inside, shielding his hands from broken glass, and peered into the back seat. 3 small children sat curled together, seatbelts still fastened, eyes wide but silent, not crying, not moving, just watching him. "Hey," Evan said softly. "It's okay. I'm going to help you." He carefully unbuckled the first girl, blonde curls damp with sweat and blood, a scrape on her cheek. She stared at him, unblinking. He pulled her out, shielding her head from the metal, and passed her to a firefighter. He went back in. The second girl whimpered, but didn't scream, gripping his wrist as he lifted her. The third was so still he panicked, until she turned her head and looked at him with the same pale blue eyes. They were identical, triplets, about 5 years old, with light blonde hair matching faces. He carried the last girl out and set her gently on a stretcher. Standing there, heart racing, he watched as the ambulances pulled away, sirens piercing the dusk. "Are you coming?" a medic called from the last ambulance. Evan hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I'm going with them." He didn't know their names or their story, but something inside him had cracked open, something he couldn't ignore. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not from them. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Evan paced the waiting area, his hands stained with dry blood and dirt, time blurring around him. The girls were rushed into separate trauma bays, minor injuries, but not insignificant. Their mother was taken to the ICU, her condition critical. A nurse in blue scrubs approached. "Mr. Carroll?" He nodded. "The girls are stable," she said. "They'll be fine physically. Just cuts and bruises, a mild concussion for one." Evan's chest eased, but only a little. "And the mother?" The nurse hesitated. "She's in surgery. Internal bleeding. Head trauma. It's serious, but the doctors are doing everything they can." Evan nodded, running a hand down his face. "Can I see the girls?" "They're asleep now," the nurse said. "They've been through a lot. But before they dozed off, they asked about you." Evan looked up sharply. "About me? What did they say?" The nurse smiled gently. "They asked if the man who carried them out was still here. Said he felt familiar." Evan swallowed hard. "Do you know their names?" She checked her clipboard. "Ein, Arya, and Alexa Hardy. They're listed under the mother's emergency contact." Evan froze. The name Hardy struck him like a physical blow. His mind spun as the nurse continued speaking, her words fading into a distant hum. Hardy. Men Hardy. He hadn't heard her name in 6 years, not since their lives had briefly intertwined. Back then, he was an ambitious entrepreneur, always on the move, while she balanced part-time work at a bakery with her passion for painting. She had been light where he was shadow, laughter to his stress, warmth in a world that demanded competition. And then, just like that, he'd left. A promotion, a new city, a busier life. He told himself there was no space for anything messy. There were no arguments, no pleas. She simply let him go. He never knew she was pregnant. The realization hit him like a freight train, nearly buckling his knees. He steadied himself against the counter, the nurse watching him with concern. "Do you know her?" she asked gently. "Yes," he whispered. "A long time ago." He offered nothing more. With trembling hands, Evan pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Tom, I need a background check on Men Hardy." Quietly. "And arrange a DNA test discreet through private labs." Tom, ever efficient, didn't ask questions. "Understood," he replied before hanging up. Evan sat in the waiting room, his hands clasped and elbows on his knees. The carefully ordered world he built, his sterile empire, his rigid routines, the loneliness he'd never admitted suddenly felt fragile and empty. What if these girls really were his? Guilt crashed over him in waves, not just for leaving men, but for all the years the girls, his daughters, had lived without him. What kind of father he unknowingly failed to be? Eventually, the nurse returned. One of them woke up for a moment, she said softly. She asked if her mommy was okay. Evan looked up, his chest tight. "What did you tell her?" "I said her mom is getting the best care possible, and that the man who saved him is still here." He stood, voice low. "Will you tell them I'll be here when they wake up?" The nurse nodded. "Of course." Evan moved to a chair closer to their room and sat down, this time with resolve. He wasn't going anywhere, not until he knew the truth, not until he saw those blue eyes again. Deep down, he already knew. By sunrise, golden light spilled across the hospital windows. Evan hadn't slept. He sat outside the girl's room, back stiff, coffee cold in his hands. Nurses moved quietly through the halls. Machines beeped softly, and his thoughts circled endlessly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those three faces, silent, steady, waiting for him to understand. He rose and approached the window. Inside, the triplets slept under identical blankets, their hair brushed, faces peaceful. The sight of them, so small and vulnerable, did something to his heart he couldn't explain. He didn't just feel responsible. He felt connected, tethered in a way that defied logic. A quiet knock startled him. Tom, his assistant, stood there, holding a manila envelope. His expression said everything. "It's them," Tom said quietly, handing over the papers. "The DNA matches all three. There's no doubt." Evan took the envelope, his hand shaking. He waited until he was alone to open it. The stamped, notarized reports confirmed what his heart already knew. He was their father. Every detail on those pages screamed a truth that would change his life forever. He walked slowly back to the girls' room. A kind nurse, Carrera, gestured that the girls were starting to wake. Evan hesitated, then stepped inside. The smallest, Alexa, blinked awake first. Her gaze landed on him, steady, unafraid. The other two stirred, and soon 3 pairs of blue eyes were fixed on him. No one spoke at first. The silence was heavy, full of unspoken questions. Finally, Arya sat up a little. "Are you the man who saved us?" Evan nodded. "Yes, I was there." "Why did you help us?" asked Eileen, her voice wary. He knelt beside their beds. "Because you needed help. And because I think I was meant to be there." The girls exchanged glances, then Alexa tilted her head. "Do you know our mommy?" Evan's breath caught. He nodded slowly. "Yes. Her name is Men Hardy. I knew her a long time ago." There was another pause. Then Evelyn whispered, "She said our daddy was far away, that he was busy but nice." Evan's voice broke a little. "I didn't know about you. If I had, I would never have stayed away." Arya leaned forward, searching his face. "So, are you our dad?" He met their eyes, honest and open. "Yes, I am." The silence broke. Alexa's lip trembled. Eileen turned into her pillow. Arya blinked back tears. "Is Mommy going to die?" she asked, voice trembling. The question pierced him. He shook his head, forcing calm into his voice. "She's very sick. But the doctors are helping her, and I'll be here with you every day." The girls didn't cry out loud, but their tears came, slow, silent, heartbreaking. Evan sat with them, letting 3 small hands grip his tightly, as if they already knew how much they'd lost and how much they still needed. That night, Evan didn't leave. He arranged a private suite in the pediatric wing, brought in books, toys, and warm blankets. He sat on the floor, helped them draw, told them stories from his own childhood, about thunderstorms and burnt toast and silly mistakes. He didn't know how to be a father, but he knew how to be present, how to keep a promise. By the time the girls drifted off again, their hands tangled in his, Evan understood. His life was no longer about boardrooms or business deals. It was about these 3 little hearts, and the woman fighting for hers just down the hall. The ICU was hushed and dim when Evan stepped into the waiting lounge. 5 days had passed since the accident, and men still hadn't woken. Every day, Evan checked on her, asked the nurses for updates, sat outside her door even when there was nothing new. He visited the girls every morning and night, making sure they felt safe and loved. But a part of him stayed in that tense hallway, waiting for the woman who once made his world feel whole to open her eyes again. He'd asked for permission to suit her privately. The hospital allowed it. No one questioned him after the DNA test, after seeing how the girls clung to him, after watching him stay all night instead of returning to his penthouse. He could have hired help, but he didn't. He couldn't. When the nurse finally opened Men's door and nodded, Evan stepped in quietly. Machines hummed, and the steady beep of her heart monitor filled the silence. Evan stood frozen, the name Hardy echoing in his mind like a distant thunderclap. The nurse's words faded into a blur as memories rushed back 6 years ago, when Men Hardy was the brightest part of his life. Back then, he was an ambitious entrepreneur, always on the move, while she brought light and laughter to his world. She worked at a bakery, painted in her spare time, and made even his hardest days feel softer. But life had pulled them apart. A promotion, a new city, and Evan convinced himself there was no room for anything complicated. There were no arguments, no goodbyes, just a quiet ending. He never knew she was pregnant. The truth hit him hard, nearly knocking the breath from his lungs. He steadied himself, gripping the edge of the counter as the nurse watched him with concern. "Do you know her?" she asked softly. "Yes," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "A long time ago." He didn't explain further. Instead, he pulled out his phone with trembling hands and called his assistant. "Tom, I need a background check on Men Hardy, and a DNA test quietly through private labs." Tom, ever efficient, just said, "Understood," and hung up. Evan sat in the waiting room, his hands clasped tightly, elbows on his knees. The carefully constructed life he'd built, his routines, his empire, his solitude, suddenly felt fragile and meaningless. What if those girls really were his? Guilt washed over him, not just for leaving Men, but for all the years the girls had grown up without him. What kind of father had he unknowingly failed to be? A nurse returned and gently said one of them woke up for a moment. She asked if her mommy was okay. Evan's chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I said her mom is getting the best care possible, and that the man who saved him is still here." He stood slowly. "Will you tell them I'll be here when they wake up?" The nurse nodded, and as she walked away, Evan moved to a nearby chair and sat down, determined not to leave until he knew the truth. Deep down, he already sensed it. By sunrise, golden light filtered through the hospital windows. Evan hadn't slept. He sat outside the girls' room, his back stiff, coffee cold in his hands. Nurses moved quietly, machines beeped softly, and his thoughts circled endlessly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 3 faces, identical, silent, waiting for him to realize what he already knew. He rose and walked to the window. Inside, the triplets slept under identical blankets, their faces peaceful. He didn't just feel responsible. He felt connected, as if some invisible thread tied him to them. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Tom, his assistant, stood there with a manila envelope. His expression said it all. "It's them," Tom said quietly, handing him the papers. "The DNA matches all three. There's no doubt." Evan took the envelope, hands trembling. Alone, he opened it. The stamped reports confirmed what his heart already knew: he was their father. Every detail on those pages changed his life forever. He walked slowly toward the girls' room. A kind nurse, Carrera, gestured that the girls were waking up. Evan hesitated, then stepped inside. The smallest, Alexa, blinked awake first, her gaze steady and unafraid. The other two stirred, and soon 3 pairs of blue eyes were fixed on him. Silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Arya sat up and asked, "Are you the man who saved us?" Evan nodded. "Yes, I was there." "Why did you help us?" Eileen asked, her voice wary. He knelt beside their beds. "Because you needed help. And because I think I was meant to be there." The girls exchanged glances, then Alexa tilted her head. "Do you know our mommy?" Evan's breath caught. "Yes. Her name is Men Hardy. I knew her a long time ago." There was another long pause. Then Eileen whispered, "She said our daddy was far away. That he was busy but nice." Evan's voice broke. "I didn't know about you. If I had, I never would have stayed away." Arya leaned forward, searching his face. "So, are you our dad?" He met their eyes, honest and open. "Yes, I am." The silence broke. Alexa's lip trembled. Eileen turned into her pillow. Arya blinked back tears. "Is Mommy going to die?" she asked, voice trembling. The question pierced him. He shook his head, forcing calm into his voice. "She's very sick. But the doctors are helping her, and I'll be here with you every day." The girls didn't cry out loud, but their tears came slow, silent, heartbreaking. Evan sat with him, letting 3 small hands grip his tightly, as if they already knew how much they'd lost and how much they still needed. That night, Evan didn't leave. He arranged a private suite in the pediatric wing, brought in books, toys, and warm blankets. He sat on the floor, helped them draw, and told them stories from his childhood about thunderstorms, burnt toast, and silly mistakes. He didn't know how to be a father, but he knew how to be present and keep a promise. By the time the girls drifted off again, their hands tangled in his, Evan understood. His life was no longer about boardrooms or business deals. It was about these 3 little hearts, and the woman fighting for hers just down the hall. The ICU was hushed and dim when Evan stepped into the waiting lounge. 5 days had passed since the accident, and men still hadn't woken. Every day, Evan checked on her, asked the nurses for updates, sat outside her door even when there was nothing new. He visited the girls every morning and night, making sure they felt safe and loved. But a part of him stayed in that tense hallway, waiting for the woman who once made his world feel whole to open her eyes again. He'd asked for permission to sit with her privately. The hospital allowed it. No one questioned him after the DNA test, after seeing how the girls clung to him, after watching him stay all night instead of returning to his penthouse. He could have hired help, but he didn't. He couldn't. When the nurse finally opened Min's door and nodded, Evan stepped in quietly. Machines hummed, and the steady beep of her heart monitor filled the silence. Evan looked at her, his voice gentle. "They're amazing, strong, bright, and braver than I ever deserved. But I want to be there for them now, for every day ahead." A quiet settled between them, not heavy but thoughtful. Then Evan reached into his pocket and handed her a small folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully, a crayon drawing by Alexa. 3 little girls holding hands with a tall man beneath a big smiling sun. At the bottom in wobbly handwriting it read, "Our family." Meme pressed the drawing to her heart, her eyes lingering on it. "They've been through so much, and you were there when they needed someone most." Evan's voice was steady. "I'm not leaving. I want to be here, not just for them, but for you too." Tears filled Meme's eyes, but this time they weren't from pain or fear. They were from relief, a release of years of tension and loneliness, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten, hope. Later that evening, Evan brought the girls into her hospital room. At first, they entered shyly, as if afraid she might disappear. But the moment she opened her arms, all three rushed to her, clinging tightly as if trying to become part of her again. She held them, kissed their heads, whispered their names. When her eyes met Evan's over their shoulders, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't a promise. It was a new beginning. That night, the five of them shared takeout in the hospital room. Arya perched on the bed, telling a winding story about a bird she'd seen from the window. Ayn sorted napkins into neat piles. Alexa handed out fortune cookies, pretending to read everyone's future. Evan watched them all, his heart so full it almost hurt. For years, he'd measured success in contracts and awards. Now, in this small, cluttered room with mismatched voices and takeout containers, he understood this was real success. This was the miracle. 2 weeks after Min first woke up, the hospital finally discharged her. Her body was still healing, but her mind was clear and her spirit grew stronger each day. Evan had already prepared everything. A cozy apartment near the hospital, filled with soft light, calming colors, and space for the girls to feel at home. He arranged for a nurse to help with practical needs, but the emotional work of rebuilding their family was his alone to carry, and he welcomed it. Moving day was quiet. No fanfare, no big trucks, just Min in a wheelchair, Evan beside her, and the girls skipping ahead, opening every door as if discovering a castle. For the first time, they had a home with all five of them together. No more hospital beds or visiting hours, just the same roof, the same rain on the windows, the same breakfast table. Min still had moments of doubt, her hands fidgeting when she thought no one was watching, sometimes pausing in doorways as if she didn't quite belong. Evan never pressed her. He just stayed close, folding blankets, setting plates, unpacking storybooks, showing her, day by day, that he was here for good. She watched him with the cautious hope of someone who'd been left before, but wanted to believe this time was different. The girls adapted quickly. They'd always had each other, but now they had both parents. Evan drove them to school every morning, sometimes still in pajamas and slippers, hair wild from the chaos of packing lunches and finding shoes. He loved it. The syrup spills, the bedtime debates over storybooks, the noisy, messy, beautiful chaos he'd never expected to want. One night, about a week after the move, Evan found Min sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, tea in hand. The girls were finally asleep after an evening of laughter and tears. Recovery wasn't a straight line. Nightmares still came. Evan sat beside her, offering a quiet smile. They listened to the city, the distant hum of traffic, a siren, a dog barking somewhere below. "I thought I could do it all," Min said softly, not looking at him. "I wanted to protect them from knowing their father didn't choose them, so I made the choice for you." Evan let her speak, knowing it mattered. "I used to wonder, what if I told you? What if you'd stayed? But watching you with them these weeks, I realized if you'd stayed back then, you wouldn't have been ready. But you are now." He turned to face her, his eyes warm in the golden streetlight. "I don't deserve forgiveness for what I missed. But I'll spend my life showing up anyway." "You already are," she whispered. He took her hand, their fingers weaving together like they had in another life. For the first time in years, there was no distance between them, just two people who'd survived separate storms, now standing in the calm together. A soft cry echoed from one of the bedrooms. Min moved to rise, but Evan squeezed her hand. "I've got it," he said, kissing her temple before heading down the hall, already knowing which girl it was by the sound. Min watched him disappear into the dark, a quiet smile on her lips, her heart finally at peace. This wasn't the life they planned. It wasn't perfect or simple, but it was real. It was theirs, and it was just beginning. Summer arrived gently, with the scent of grass and children's laughter from the park. The apartment felt lived in now, drawings taped to the walls, stuffed animals on the couch, shoes piled at the door. It was far from perfect, but perfect wasn't the goal. It was home, alive with the energy of a family finding its rhythm. Evan's days changed. He still ran his business, but with boundaries. He handed off more to his team, stopped chasing growth for its own sake. If a call came after 5, he let it wait. He felt no guilt, only gratitude. Every evening, he was home to set the table, listen to the girls' stories, and kiss 3 foreheads goodnight. Every morning he brewed 2 coffees, one for himself, one for Mean, and watched their daughters argue over the car music. Healing didn't happen all at once. Mean still had days when fatigue crept in, moments when old doubts returned. Evan battled his own guilt. But instead of hiding it, they shared it, spoke it aloud, and let it go together. It became something they carried as a family. One Sunday, they visited the botanical gardens, a place Mean used to sketch. The girls ran ahead, dragging Evan to every fountain and flower. Mean walked beside him, steady and sure. They sat on a bench beneath climbing roses, watching the girls spin in the sunlight. "This feels like something I only imagined when I was alone," she said quietly. Evan studied her smile, delight in her eyes. "It doesn't feel imagined to me. It feels earned." The girls ran back, arms full of wildflowers, squeezing onto the bench until Mean was surrounded and laughing. Evan wrapped his arms around them all, holding them close. For a long moment, there was no pain, no past, just the present, 5 hearts finally in sync. As the sun set, Alexa looked up at Evan and asked, "Are we always going to be like this now?" He smiled, his voice gentle and sure. "We are, because this is our forever." That night, the girls fell asleep tangled together. Evan stood in the doorway, heart overflowing. Mean joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. In the quiet, they said nothing. They didn't need to. Everything had changed, but not in a way that broke them. This change had built something new, something lasting. In the soft hallway light, Evan reached for her hand, and together they stood, steady and whole, knowing these walls, these voices, this love, was the story they were always meant to live. Not the perfect story, not the planned one, but the truest one, and it was only just beginning. What makes this ending so powerful is its honesty. There are no grand gestures, just the quiet, everyday moments that define real love and redemption. Evan's journey is about facing his past and choosing every day to be the father and partner he never thought he could be. The girls, once lost in uncertainty, are now simply daughters who found their home. And Mean, after years of carrying everything alone, finally allows herself to lean on someone and be loved without condition. Healing erase the past, but it builds a future where pain no longer defines you. This is a story of second chances, earned, not given, and that's why it lingers long after the last page.